more arguments, because we had a lot to say about the stuff that I will introduce you here. But we have been working on this for a long time. I will introduce you in whatever this is. The path of development was a research that we designed in the University of Ribeirão Preto since February of 2018. But we had some issues after pandemic times, actually during pandemic times, including the reduction of many of our employees in the university. My colleague that was with us in our last presentation here, Beatrice, is not anymore with us because of cuts in university. And I'm trying to revive this work despite this change in the team. And this presentation will try to bring you some of the findings that we had in this period. And there are a lot of other findings that are not here in this document, but I will try to show you exactly what we are trying to do. So, as you were aware about it, HDI is a metric developed by our TSM, and it includes life expectancy index, education index, and GDP index, GDP per capita actually. And it's created around United Nations Development Program, and it tries to rank the results of what is placed that is the level of access to any opportunities in life that the major of the population has in those countries that are listed. So what we do is try to associate other macroeconomic indices with HDI using precedence analysis. So this precedence analysis follows the idea of constructing a multidimensional networks connecting all those indices, trying to understand what would be the better path for reaching whatever is a good rate of HDI. So it's a very uncommon kind of work that we try to develop there, so we don't have many references about that. So this is the indicators that we used, all of them generated in prospection of World Bank. So we use HDI, Human Development Index, Foreign Direct Investment Net, Trading Services as a percentage of the GDP, the Consumer Price Index variation, and it's a variation because we had some problems about this series with units root. And TTSP, there is taxes on goods and service variation, taxes on income, profit and capital gains, cost of business startup is a very new index that they are collecting there in World Bank. Gross domestic product variation is the GDP variation. ER, that is employment rate above 15 years old. Life expectation in years, there is endogenously one of the components of the HDI. Death rate per thousand, population variation, agricultural value added as a percentage of GDP is a very important index for us in Brazil. And health expenditure per capita, there is HDPC. So our numbers in this research, as I told you, this is a research that is starting to revive in our universe. Up to 182 countries were considered in the gross data, 31 years of data from 1990 to 2020, and they were provided by the World Bank. 15 indicators, including HDI, that is our reference for this work. 210 precedence analyses were run up to now among these variables, because that's the the crossing over of all the variables that we have. 3,600 relationships studied among variables, considering 3 legs plus the present, and 246,380 registers of gross data we have to analyze for reaching some of the conclusions that I have shown you. What is our methodology here? Data were collected from this basis of World Bank and presented to me in a panel. Then we made all these data shares tested for heteroscedasticity and unit root negation. Some of them we had to improve because they did not pass on this test. So those variables that had an evidence of non-stationary, they were treated so that this behavior could disappear, often working with the variation of the analyzed variables. So we don't use the variable, we use the variation of the variable that make it cleaner. After all the shears were considered stationary, we did another test for testing for the heteroscedasticity, and that led us to work with robust models. So we created 102 pairs of these shears, and once again they were tested using these tests. I know that it's very common for all of you guys. And finally, after all the tests indicate the feasibility of this analysis, we run estimating a fixed effect model to predict the dependable variables based on the current year's dependent variable and its previous years. That means that we considered a panel using a model pretty close to the Granger causality model, but we call it precedence once all of you know it's not exactly causality. Finally, we calculated the task statistics and the p-values for our coefficients using the robust standard errors, and this allows us to assess the significance of each of those variables compared to the other. We repeated this process for 2 and 3 year lags, so we did that in each variable 4 times, actually 3 times to find the lags, and then in a reverse mode, so we could analyze if the dependent variable could impact the other one if that was dependent. We repeated the process for each pair of variables, and we had some interesting findings, but all those findings are not exactly what we were aiming to. We are aiming to consist a new model for studying the precedence analysis using two-dimensional network, and we already created this network. We are dealing now with the weight of this network because its influence is not exactly one specific unit to be treated. So all the devices that we have to treat networks considered not influence exactly, but one same unit. So when we are talking about influence, we are talking about specific unities for each pair of relationships. Okay, so each pair of nodes. So it's a completely different approach, and we have to improve this for taking into new findings. That's the focus of this research. But we have some very interesting findings. We found statistically very well-shown significant relationship between foreign direct investment and human development index. That means that when you have more, at least what precedes the HDI is the foreign direct investment and not the counterwise. Okay, so when you have foreign direct investment, when that goes higher, usually in the next flags that we'll find a higher HDI. Oh, but that's really common sense. There are other issues that we found that makes this common sense more evident in terms of the empirical research, and there are ones that are really frightening us in terms of finding something that the common sense doesn't show like that. So we discovered the trading service also led to HDI. The consumer price index, when you have inflation, the HDI in the next lags tends to go lower in terms of the rank, in terms of the index. However, when you have a change in the HDI, nothing happens to the price index. When we compare the HPI with the TGSP, that is the taxes on goods and services, there is another thing. There is that was a lot of for a lot of us a common sense, but that says that when we tax in the goods and services, usually we have in the other leg of HPI an impact that is inverse. That means that when we grow our tax rates in services and goods, the HPI has a negative impact in the other legs. And these findings are really nice to empirically, using this method, show that some of our assumptions in other kind of tasks that we make are really maintaining its responses in these tasks. And other one, as the taxes and incomes and profits, that's a very good one. When the governments make the rates of taxes higher in the next legs, that will be an impact for good in the HDI. That means when we pay more revenues, taxes, we'll have an improvement in the HDI. And there's a lot of explanations about that. And just very new in guys, it's really important. There is the how easy it is to create a business in the countries. That shows us when you have a change in the procedures that cost for opening a startup, you have impact in the HDI. So this kind of relationship we're making not only with the HDI as a variable, but to a lot of other variables and between the variables, just like this. In Brazil, we are really worried about the agricultural part of the GDP because it's a very important and consistent part of our GDP. And analyzing the expectancy, the life expectancy at birth with this percentage of participation of the agriculture in the GDP, we see a negative correlation when we are talking about the precedents, actually. So that suggests that growth in the sector might be associated with lower life expectancy. So this is something that is really different than what we used to hear in our usual economic models. And there is a lot of other findings that are really interesting, but that's not exactly what we want to do. What we want to do is to take into the network and finally explain what is the path of the development using this technique. I did bring you a kind of illustration of what we are now doing. We have all the relationships among all the devices, but we have to understand how to construct this network, and that's exactly the part that we are now. We made and remade this several times, but we are still looking for something that is more feasible, and maybe in our next meeting I can show you something well developed in terms of this new methodology. Moreover, the use of this is still in development, and this will be a new, we think that this can be a new way of perceiving those indices and treating those indices to try to understand how the precedents of those lead to a better condition in terms of HDI to lead government and public decision in terms of investing whatever resources that the country has. Thank you very much.
Great, absolutely great. That's done. Okay, questions?
Thank you, Christian. It would be nice to link the national level with the regional level, because inside countries you have enormous sectors, right? And you might want to look at some of what the Monica had done, is done inside the zoo using the HDI at the municipals level. Because there you get important spillover effects that I think are increasingly interesting, particularly in terms of investing strategically in one community as opposed to another has different outcomes in terms of affecting the industries, as you suggested here at the national level. But I think the variation is probably likely to be stronger and larger once you get inside countries. So that might be a nice extension.
Yes. Thank you very much. It goes in the same direction that I was thinking, clustering those countries for specificities in terms of development, and that would be well. I try to follow this way.
So for the questions, please here, because we can hear from.
More questions? If I may, the last question is about the role of income inequality. As far as I know, HDI actually does not take into account income inequality. So, for instance, growing income of capital income could get in raising income inequality, and for some literature, this is quite dangerous even for growth.
That's great. We made it analysis that an increase in the GDP doesn't impact the HDI. That's something that we were, that's supposed to happen. But at least in our method, that's not the direction. And the counterpart direction is not the same. We don't have data of the salaries. We don't have the data. But we can assume that the GDP oscillation, even when it gets higher and it gets lower, has no relationship with the HDI. What our task supposes that we have to change the structure of the social relations and the economic relations, but whatever is the result of the GDP, that doesn't affect the HDI because the distribution of this variation